raise questions for clarity and see how best we manage this. Let me allow Commissioner Love to come and read the statement, and then we'll engage with the rest of the proceedings. Thank you very much, and once more, welcome to the Electoral Commission.
Thank you very much, Kate, and can I also welcome my fellow Commissioner, Dr. Masuku, and to all of you who are here. With less than 1 week to our election day, the Commission is pleased to report that everything is in place and ready for South Africa's 6th national and provincial elections. The first votes cast in the elections on Saturday, 27th April, by voters abroad are currently being received at the National Office of the Electoral Commission. The first batches of cast ballots are expected from today, and these will come in, they will trickle in until they are all received from the 121 missions around the world. Excuse me. Over the coming weekend, the final preparations will be made for the opening on Monday of the country's 22,924 voting stations. This includes the securing of keys and access to the voting station venues and the pitching of 1,059 tents where no suitable permanent structures are available. On Monday morning, election materials will be transported from local warehouses to voting stations ready for the first special votes to be cast from 9 in the morning. 774,094 voters have been granted special permission to cast a special vote on the 6th and 7th of May, and this is going to involve 58.4% of that number, which is equal to 452,418 votes that will be conducted through home visits by election officials, and 321,676 voters, which is 41.6% of those special votes, will be carried out at the different voting stations which will be open. The materials that have to be transported will include 60 million ballot papers for the national and 9 provincial elections, almost 300,000 ballot boxes, nearly 45,000 voting compartments, about 25,000 station arrow signs and other signage, and about 56,255 stationery packs. A very, very big endeavor logistically. All these materials will be escorted by the South African Police Service officers and other security personnel to ensure safe delivery to voting stations, and we again express our appreciation for this measure of support. All special votes cast on Monday and Tuesday, along with all sensitive materials, including the ballot papers, will then be transported and secured in storage overnight at municipal warehouses and other secure locations, including local police stations on Monday and Tuesday, before being transported back to the voting station on election day. On our election day, Wednesday, 8th of May, voting stations will be open from 7 in the morning until 9 in the evening to allow the 26.7 million registered voters to cast their ballots for the national and provincial elections. And we really urge each one of that 26.7 million to turn up and vote. Voting stations will be staffed by approximately 189,000 election officials who have volunteered and been trained over the last 2 months to conduct the elections in the way that is necessary. There are on average 8 election officials per voting stations, and these include a presiding officer, a deputy presiding officer, and officials to perform the various aspects of voting processes. They will assist voters in the queue, including checking that they have the right identification documents. And as many of you know, only green barcoded ID books or a smart card ID or a valid temporary ID can be accepted. The voting officials will also help with the scanning of voters' ID document in order to check the voter's name against the voter's roll. Their left thumb will be inked with indelible ink by staff officials, and they will have their voting ballots for the national and provincial ballot papers stamped and issued to them. Officials are also able and available to capture addresses for those voters whose address does not appear on the voter's roll. Each political party is permitted to deploy up to 2 party agents at every single one of the voting stations in order to oversee voting and counting. We have domestic and international observers who will also be deployed at voting stations around the country. At this stage, we have just over 70 observer organizations that have been accredited by the Commission. Voting stations will close at 9 p.m., as I mentioned, on voting day, but every voter who is in the queue in order to vote at the time of 9 p.m. will still be allowed to vote. As long as those people are in the queue, they will be allowed to vote. Once the voting station closes, the counting of votes begins immediately at the voting station. The counting is conducted by election officials and is witnessed by party agents and observers. Once counting is completed, the results slip for each voting station is completed by the presiding officer and is signed by party agents, who are also encouraged to take photographs of each of the result slips so that the parties can be able to compare these to the final result as it will be captured on the results system. One copy of the results slip is posted on the door of the voting station, while the second copy is taken back to the local IEC office, where it is scanned into the results system, and the data, the results data on the results slip, is captured through a double capture process in order to reduce any risk of human error. The captured results are compared against the scan of the results slip and audited by independent auditors before they are transmitted to the national and provincial operations centers, where they immediately and simultaneously become available to the Electoral Commission, to political parties, to observers, and very importantly, directly to the media as well. The final responsibilities for election officials will be to ensure the secure rollback of all election material to local and provincial warehouses for storage. The Electoral Act requires that all completed ballot papers be retained in storage for a period of 6 months. As we celebrate South Africa's 25th anniversary of our first democratic elections, the Electoral Commission calls on all registered voters to participate peacefully, to participate with patience, and we ask that voters check their voting station location by SMSing their ID numbers to the following number, 32810. They can reach the contact center as well of the Electoral Commission in order to establish their voting station on 0800 11 8000 for all inquiries regarding elections. We thank you very much for being here, and I hand back to Kate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the IEC Deputy Chairperson, Vice Chairperson, Commissioner Love. I'm going to open the floor for questions of clarity on her statement and on the statement of preparations. Basically, come Monday, 6, 7, 8, South Africa goes to vote. Let me, when you introduce yourself, then you pose the question so that we know who we're speaking to. Celia, assist us with the mic. I've got a question at the back, a second one here, and the third one.
Good morning. My name is Mswandile Mbeche from the SABC. I do understand that on the election day, I think you said the closing time will be 9 o'clock, I think as opposed to 7 that we used to. But on the special days, is it still the same? So when are the, not gates, what polling stations opening? I'm sorry,
Okay.
and when are they closing on those 2 special days?
All right. Okay, let me take the second question and the third one here. Celia in front.
Good morning, Natasha Puri here from the SABC. I just wanted to know, Commissioner Love, let's just say, God forbid, somebody loses their ID today or throughout the course of the weekend and they need to go vote. I mean, what happens then if a person doesn't have their ID and they need to vote? Thank you.
Hi, good morning. It's Kylie Kumala here from ENCA. Just a bit of clarity in light of the Concord cases in as far as the independent candidates are concerned. Do you think perhaps that may affect your operations where you may have to reprint some of the stuff that you have? But also regarding some pending cases as well. For example, in relation to the matter between Ms. Brown and the EFF, what's the way forward there in terms of trying to get a solution? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's first deal with these questions and then we'll do the last round of questions. If I may allow my team to tackle the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mbeche. The voting hours for special votes on the 6th and the 7th is 9 o'clock in the morning and the stations close at 1700 hours with the following proviso. If everybody approved for special vote at that station, the station may close earlier than 1700 hours. On election day, the voting hours remain as has been the case in all national and provincial elections, opening at 7 in the morning and closing at 2100 in the evening. In instances, Natasha, of lost IDs, Home Affairs will be operational on the days of special votes, the 6th and the 7th. They will also be operational on election day from 7 in the morning until 2100 hours in the evening to enable a person who has lost their ID to go get issued with a temporary ID document. As it relates to the Concord matter, Kaelihle, we are in front of that court as respondents as we speak. The case is ongoing and we will abide the decision of the court. I'll ask Commissioner Love to deal with the cases as it relates to the matter brought by Ms. Brown against the EFF and its leader.
Just to say with regard to that case, we have, after engaging with both parties in that case, we have indicated that that is a matter that either party, in this case Ms. Brown, can take to the court, which she's opted to do, and we of course will abide by that decision. In relation to the case concerning the independent candidates, as we've expressed in our court papers, it would not be possible for us to reprint the ballot papers in time for the 8th of May, but as the DCO has already said, we'll clearly abide by what the court decides in relation to that, beyond that concern. Thanks.
Let me take the last round of questions before we wrap up. The repeaters here. Let me start here in the front, and then a lady at the back, and then Kylie and Zwandile there, and the last one, and the very last one. Okay, Sile, stick with me, please.
Hello, this is Nerea Gonzalez from the Spanish news agency EFE, and I would like to ask you if you can share some more details about the observers accredited for the elections, especially the international ones. If you can share some examples.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Denzel Taylor from Power 98.7. I'd just like to ask on the issue of security. There have been a few disruptions already, and what your plans are, and whether you are speaking to the security elements, systems, about what you would do and how you will manage the specifics on the day around, just the security aspects of the election.
Thank you. Noni Mukati from Independent Media. With regards to the tallying up of the ballot papers and the results, you mentioned earlier in the week that you're hoping to release the final results on Saturday. I wanted to find out what is the process regarding that. If there are any disputes, how do you sort of intend to deal with that so that you do release the results on Saturday as planned? Thank you.
My name is Eric Naki from the Citizen newspaper. I would like to know if the IEC has received any complaint from a party called African Transformation Congress, disputing the registration of the African Transformation Movement, ATM, and perhaps to say what are the details of the complaint. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Have I missed any? Okay. Tile, we've missed Mzwandile. I thought I covered you. Okay, that's fine. Let's take Mzwandile and then the crew in front, and then we'll deal with responses. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Kate. A quick one. Given that we have seen in KwaZulu-Natal last week the horrible weather conditions disrupting just about everything. So in the event on the day that kind of weather happens and it affects the operations of the IEC and perhaps even the voter turnout itself, what is it that the IEC has as a contingency plan? Number two, I know that we appear to have gone past the rolling blackout stage, but the experts have told us that these things don't announce when they come. So there are some of those unplanned generator shortages. So in the event we are plunged into darkness, is the IEC ready with its generators as promised, I guess, earlier?
Okay. I've got last two questions in front, and then we'll deal with responses.
Natasha again, just in regards to Denzel Taylor's question, of security, are you aware that a certain civil society organization that goes by the name of PAPI is planning a protest on election day because of the petrol prices? What contingency measures have you put in place to ensure that they don't disrupt, the whole voting process? Thank you.
All right. Maybe just going back to the question regarding the court process before the court. Are you perhaps mindful of the impact it may have in the electoral process? And maybe just to touch a bit on Natasha's question regarding the protest that may happen. I would imagine that you'll be working with SABC and other law enforcement agencies to have a peaceful election, but do you think you have sufficient measures on that score? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. I'm going to allow Team IEC to deal with those. Dr. Masuku?
Thank you very much, Kate. I'm going to deal with the security question. The quick answer to that is that, yes, the Electoral Commission is in constant liaison with the security forces. In fact, just a moment ago, the Minister for Police gave a press briefing where he went into very great detail in terms of how those security forces are going to be deployed, from guarding the voting stations themselves to escorting the staff of the Electoral Commission as they transport materials to the voting station. And so there'll be oversight over that. If I'm not quoting him incorrectly, he said a total of about 8 policemen are going to be deployed per voting station. But normally they move around and they provide that security. With regard the issue around PAPI, I think you said, I think it is important to remind South Africans, even though the right to protest is protected in law, it is also protected in law that you don't interfere with the processes of the Electoral Commission. So it's actually illegal to plan anything that is going to obstruct the Electoral Commission in performing its duty. So I think that is a message that I have gotten up to say, because I've been trying to remind people quite often that you do not and you're not allowed to interfere in the business of the Electoral Commission. Our job is to make sure that every citizen is availed an opportunity to vote, and everyone has to cooperate with the Electoral Commission in order to do that. Thank you.
Just to underscore, any form of protest, march, demonstrations are outlawed on election day. The law requires the Electoral Commission to release the results of the election within 7 days. Traditionally, we've always released the results on a Saturday after the election day. However, the Commission cannot release the results earlier than 2100 hours on the Friday, because it must first consider all the objections that are material to the outcome of the result. So any interested party, any interested person has until 2100 hours on Friday evening to lodge an objection to the outcome of the results, which is material to the outcome. And between then and when the Electoral Commission releases the result, they must evaluate all those objections and make a determination. We call on all political parties and interested persons, if they think they have an objection, raise it as soon as possible, preferably at the level of the voting station, so that corrective action can be taken on the spot. If that fails, you can raise objections with the Electoral Commission as soon as possible to enable us to investigate and to issue decisions so that we can issue results still on the Saturday. Mr. Mbeje, the CEO of the Commission is a priest. So we've been very seized with prayer to ensure that there's no inclement weather on election day. But if prayer doesn't work, we have plans working with disaster teams in provinces, with SABs to enable us to access voting stations that are inaccessible. As we speak in KZN, the disaster teams are busy doing some rehabilitation work to enable us to access voting stations where bridges or roads have been swept away as a result of floods. The Commission also has provision and recourse in law to deal and consider on a case-by-case basis instances where they cannot guarantee the freeness or fairness of an election owing to localized circumstances, and those we will consider on a case-by-case basis. ESCOM is seized with the responsibility to keep the lights on, not only for the election, but so that normal life can happen for the citizens. They have assured us that, save of a miracle, they should have enough capacity for supply for next week. On our part, we have made contingency measures to deal with localized outages, and we will work in conjunction with ESCOM, the power utilities in the cities, to ensure that where we are challenged, we could get back to operation in as short a period as possible. We've also sourced some alternative source of illumination so that counting processes at the voting stations are not hampered by loss of power because of one or the other reason. Commissioner Love? The ATM, the party has approached the Electoral Court to ask for a relief in the following terms. That the Chief Electoral Officer aid in registering ATM as a political party. We've just received the papers, we will consider them, and we will favor the court with our perspective in a form of an affidavit, and we will await the outcome of that court decision. But we think we will be opposing the matter very, very strongly.
Maybe let me, since we've been talking about court cases, respond to the question about whether or not we are mindful of the potential impact of the case before the Constitutional Court. Certainly we are. We think it's a significant issue, and I think we have advanced our indication in those papers, particularly in relation to the way in which the preparations are for these elections are at an advanced stage, the potential implications for these elections. But nonetheless, we have also indicated that it's a major issue for South Africans at large, and so we are also mindful of that. But as we mentioned before, notwithstanding the significance of the issue, it does need to be ventilated in court. Our papers are available, they're public documents, so that's something that you could be appraised of in more detail. With regard to the international observers, the Commission has a few international observer delegations. Just by way of example, we have an international observer delegation that's been put together by the political organs of SADC. We also have international observers who come through various organizations that we have special relations with. So, for example, there is an international election management body that will be sending some people to these elections. We have the SADC electoral management body, which is called SADC ECF. They will be sending an observer mission. So there are observers who come from other parts of the world in that particular way. But there are two other categories that I would say. We have domestic observer organizations, some of which are composed very directly of people who are foreign nationals but living within our country, and many of those people are from other parts of our continent and use this as an occasion to first of all reflect on the way in which we conduct democratic elections and to gain insight and understanding themselves, but also to be able to share with us some of their own experiences in other parts of our continent. We also, as the Commission, invite as our special guests 2 members from each accredited mission with our Department of International Relations to be able to join us for our election period. They have every opportunity not just to visit voting stations, but also to be present at the results centers at the different rocks, and we engage with them and provide them with a background overview of how the process will unfold and welcome their engagement as well. I hope that that answers all the questions. Thanks.
Just as I was about to close, Kylie, you're intimidating me. All right, let's give you just one question for today. Okay, let's ask the question before we wrap up.
Just a question around cybersecurity. We know that it's a big phenomenon. So do you have some measures in place to perhaps counter any potential threats? Thank you.
Okay, beautiful. Commissioner Love, I know you have been working on that subject as well.
So if we look at cybersecurity, the digital space, I think you need to look at in 2 particular ways. First of all, it's with regard to our own systems and our own internal structures and functions that we operate through digital systems. And that cybersecurity space is very, very carefully monitored on a regular basis, but in advance of elections, we take very special measures to ensure that the system is not only monitored, but it's also audited, and that audit is then available to political parties in order to be able to review the outcome of that audit, that the system not only functions as it's supposed to function, but in addition to that, that there are security measures in place for backups and so on. So that's the one aspect of it. The second aspect of the digital space relates to the way in which the digital space is the home of various forms of social media, various social media platforms. And as I think some of you are aware, the Commission is very mindful of the influence that social media has the potential to have in a positive way, of course, but also potentially in a negative way. And for the purposes of ensuring that it is something that we've engaged with very actively, we've set up an online portal for any complaints to be received by the Commission. We have received to date through the portal over 110 complaints, which we are busy processing as rapidly as possible, and will continue to do so as we expect to receive complaints in that regard to the extent that there are allegations of abuse going forward. Thank you.
This brings to an end our press briefing for today, ladies and gentlemen. This is just the beginning of many, many ones coming through. From all of us at the IEC, thank you very much. We'll keep in touch. We've got WhatsApp groups for the media to make sure that you get information real time. But for now, let's leave it at here. Thanks very much. Thank you, Team IEC.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate.
Those who want individual interviews, Netsile is here with me. Where's Kanye? Those who require interviews, you can speak to us here.